The flash of cameras felt like tiny knives against my retinas. Each burst of light sent a stabbing pain through my skull, but I kept smiling. 22 years of practice had taught me how to smile through anything: exhaustion, humiliation, fear. The smile was as much a part of my costume as the Versace gown that cost more than most people made in 6 months. "Aretha, over here. Give us that gorgeous smile. Who are you wearing tonight?" I turned on instinct, angling my body the way my publicist had drilled into me since I was 7 years old. Left side, always the left side. Chin down slightly, eyes up through the lashes. The pose that made me look vulnerable and sultry at the same time. The pose that had graced 1,000 magazine covers. The premiere of Midnight Confession should have been my triumph. The role had pushed me to places I didn't know existed, demanded things from me that left me hollow and shaking after every take. Critics were already calling it career-defining work. But all I could think about as I smiled for the cameras was the letter that had arrived at my trailer yesterday. "I'm going to carve that pretty face off your skull." The 4th death threat in 2 weeks. Each one more specific, more intimate, more terrifying than the last. Someone knew where I slept, what I ate for breakfast, which route my driver took to the studio. Someone was watching every moment of my carefully constructed life. "Aretha, can we get a statement about the threats?" The question cut through my practiced performance. My smile flickered for just a second, enough for the cameras to catch it, to turn it into tomorrow's headline. "Aretha Tyler, cracking under pressure?" My father appeared at my elbow like he always did when things threatened to spiral. Marcus Tyler, Hollywood's most powerful manager. The man who'd turned his daughter into a commodity before she could walk. His hand settled on my lower back with just enough pressure to remind me of the rules. Keep smiling. Don't show weakness. The show must go on. "That's all for tonight, folks," he said smoothly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who controlled access to one of Hollywood's biggest stars. "Aretha needs to get inside." The hand on my back became firmer, steering me through the chaos of photographers and fans screaming my name. I caught glimpses of faces in the crowd, some worshipful, some hungry, all of them wanting something from me. My time, my attention, my soul. Inside the theater, the air was cooler, but no less suffocating. Industry people packed the lobby, all perfectly dressed, perfectly coiffed, perfectly fake. I recognized most of them. Directors who'd tried to get me alone in their trailers. Producers who'd hinted that certain favors could advance my career. Actors who smiled for the cameras then spread vicious rumors behind closed doors. This was my world. Had been my entire life, and I'd never felt more like a stranger in it. "We need to talk," my father said, his voice low enough that no one else could hear. "After the screening." I nodded mechanically, already knowing what he wanted to discuss. The threats. The attempted break-in at my house last week. The suspicious car that had followed my driver for 3 days straight. The reality we'd both been trying to ignore. Someone really did want me dead. The screening passed in a blur. I sat in the darkness, watching myself on the screen. A version of me that could cry on command, could bare her soul with perfect precision, could make audiences believe she was feeling things I'd long ago learned to shut away. The irony wasn't lost on me. I could portray every human emotion with devastating authenticity, but I'd forgotten how to actually feel them. When it ended, the applause was thunderous. I stood, smiled, waved, said all the right things. My co-star kissed my cheek. The director gave a speech praising my raw vulnerability. Industry veterans told me I'd finally arrived as a serious actress. None of them saw me at all. The after-party was at some exclusive club in West Hollywood, the kind of place where bottles of champagne cost what most people made in a month. I stayed exactly 90 minutes, long enough to be seen, not long enough to seem desperate or drunk. My father shadowed me the entire time, making sure I talked to the right people, laughed at the right jokes, networked with surgical precision. By the time we left, my face hurt from smiling and my feet were bleeding inside my 4-inch Louboutins. But I'd done my job. I'd been Aretha Tyler, America's sweetheart, the girl next door who happened to look like she'd been sculpted by angels and could cry on cue. "The car's waiting," my father said as we exited through a back entrance, away from the remaining photographers. I expected to see our usual driver, Miguel, with his kind eyes and gentle silence. Instead, a black Escalade sat idling at the curb, windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. 2 men in suits flanked the vehicle, their postures screaming security despite their attempts to look casual. "What's this?" I asked, suddenly alert in a way the champagne and exhaustion had been trying to prevent. "Your new security detail," my father said, and something in his voice made my stomach drop. "Things have escalated, Aretha. The police found evidence that the person sending those threats has been surveilling you for months. They have photos, detailed schedules, information about your daily routines that shouldn't be publicly available." My breath caught. "How detailed?" "Detailed enough that we're taking this very seriously now." The door to the Escalade opened, and a man emerged. Not one of the security guards, someone else entirely. Someone who made my instincts scream danger, even as my exhausted brain tried to process what I was seeing. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his black suit in a way that suggested the muscles beneath weren't just for show. Dark hair cut short and styled back from a face that could have been carved from granite. All sharp angles and hard edges, with absolutely no warmth in the cold gray eyes that swept over me with clinical assessment. This wasn't a bodyguard. This was something else entirely. "Aretha," my father said. "This is Drake Carter. He'll be heading your security detail personally." Drake Carter. The name rang a bell somewhere in my consciousness, though I couldn't immediately place it. But the way he looked at me, like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person, made every muscle in my body tense. "Miss Tyler," he said, his voice a deep rumble that matched everything else about him. Cold, controlled, dangerous. He didn't offer his hand, didn't smile, didn't show any of the deference I'd grown accustomed to from people who worked for me. "I don't need a babysitter," I said, exhaustion making me more blunt than usual. "I have security. Miguel has been driving me for 3 years without incident." "Miguel is a driver," Drake replied, and there was something almost dismissive in his tone. "What you need right now goes far beyond someone who knows how to navigate Los Angeles traffic." The arrogance in his voice made my jaw clench. I'd spent my entire life being told what I needed, what I should wear, how I should speak, who I should be. I didn't need another man adding his voice to that chorus. "Look," I said, turning to my father, "I appreciate the concern, but—" "This isn't a negotiation," my father interrupted, his voice carrying that edge of steel that had gotten him to the top of Hollywood's food chain. "Someone tried to break into your house, Aretha. They disabled your alarm system. They got past your gate. If your neighbor's dog hadn't started barking, God knows what would have happened." The information hit me like a physical blow. "When was this?" "2 nights ago, while you were at that charity gala." 2 nights ago. I'd been smiling for cameras at a $5,000 a plate dinner to save the rainforest or feed hungry children or whatever cause had been trendy that week. And someone had been in my house, touching my things, walking through rooms where I slept. "Why didn't you tell me?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. "Because you had a premiere to focus on," my father said, as if that explained everything. As if my career was more important than my life. Which, in his mind, it probably was. I looked back at Drake Carter, this stranger who was apparently now in charge of keeping me alive. He watched me with those cold gray eyes, and I had the unsettling feeling he could see right through the perfectly crafted exterior to the exhausted, frightened woman beneath. "Get in the car, Miss Tyler," he said, not unkindly but with absolute authority. "We have a lot to discuss, and this parking lot isn't secure." Every instinct told me to refuse, to assert some kind of control over my own life. But I was so tired. Tired of smiling, tired of performing, tired of pretending I was fine when I could feel myself cracking from the inside out. I got in the car. The interior smelled of leather and something else. Gun oil, I realized with a start. Drake slid in beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell his cologne mixed with something darker, more primal. The door closed with a solid thunk that sounded too much like a prison cell locking. "Where are we going?" I asked as the car pulled away from the curb. "Somewhere safe," Drake replied. "Your house is compromised. Your usual haunts are too public. Until we identify who's behind these threats and neutralize them, you're going to need to make some lifestyle adjustments." Lifestyle adjustments, as if my entire existence wasn't already a series of adjustments made to accommodate everyone else's needs and expectations. "I have commitments," I said, pulling out my phone to check my calendar. "Photo shoots, interviews, a table read next week for—" Drake's hand closed over mine, taking the phone with gentle but immovable force. His skin was warm, rougher than I expected, and the contact sent an unexpected jolt through me. "Those commitments just became less important than staying alive," he said, powering down my phone. I stared at him, at this stranger who just walked into my life, and immediately started making decisions about it. "You can't just—" "I can, and I will." He met my gaze steadily. "Your father hired me to keep you safe, Miss Tyler. That's what I intend to do, with or without your cooperation. Though things will go much more smoothly if you choose to work with me instead of fighting me at every turn." The presumption of it, the sheer arrogance, made anger flare hot in my chest. "You don't know anything about me or my life." "I know more than you think." He pulled out a tablet. Swiping through screens filled with information I recognized as my own life laid bare. Aretha Marie Tyler, 24 years old. Started acting at age 3 in a diaper commercial. First major role at 7 in Little Miss Sunshine. Transitioned from child star to serious actress with your performance in Breaking Point at 19. 3 Golden Globe nominations, 1 win. Currently, one of Hollywood's highest paid actresses under 30. He kept reading, and each detail felt like a violation. My failed engagement to my co-star 2 years ago. The eating disorder I'd battled at 16. The prescription medication I took for anxiety. My routine, my habits, my secrets. All reduced to bullet points on a screen. "Stop," I said, my voice tight. He looked up, and for a moment, something that might have been sympathy flickered in those cold eyes. But it was gone before I could be sure. "I don't need your life story to keep you safe," he said, setting the tablet aside. "But I do need you to understand that whoever is after you has done their homework. They know you, Miss Tyler. They've studied you. Which means I need to know you too. Every detail, every pattern, every weakness someone could exploit." The word weakness made me flinch. My whole life had been about hiding weakness, about projecting invulnerability even when I was falling apart inside. "So what happens now?" I asked, hating how lost I sounded. "Now you tell me everything," Drake said. "Every strange encounter, every person who made you uncomfortable, every gift from an overzealous fan. Everything." I looked out the window at Los Angeles streaming past. My city, my cage, the only world I'd ever really known. Somewhere out there, someone wanted me dead. And my only protection was this cold, dangerous man who looked at me like I was just another job. I didn't know it then, but Drake Carter was about to become the most dangerous thing in my life. Not because he wanted to hurt me, but because he was the first person in years who would refuse to let me hide, and that terrified me more than any death threat ever could. The safe house was in Malibu, perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean with security that would make Fort Knox jealous. Cameras everywhere, armed guards patrolling the perimeter, and enough technology to track every living thing within a mile radius. My prison had an ocean view. Drake had installed me in the master bedroom. All whites and grays with floor-to-ceiling windows that should have made the space feel open, but somehow made me feel more trapped. Like I was on display in the world's most expensive fishbowl. "The windows are bulletproof," he'd said when he saw me staring at them that first night. "Triple-layered ballistic glass. Someone could fire a rocket launcher at them and you'd be fine." The reassurance had the opposite effect. I'd spent the night lying awake, imagining all the ways someone might try to kill me if bullets weren't an option. That was 3 days ago. 3 days of being shadowed every moment, of having my phone monitored, of needing permission to step onto the fucking balcony. 3 days of Drake Carter's cold efficiency and absolute control over every aspect of my existence. I was going insane. "You need to eat," Drake said, appearing in the doorway of my bedroom without knocking. He never knocked. Privacy, apparently, was another thing I'd sacrificed for safety. "I'm not hungry," I replied, not looking up from the book I'd been pretending to read for the past hour. "You haven't eaten since yesterday morning. That bagel you picked at doesn't count. Since when is my eating schedule part of your security responsibilities? Since you passing out from low blood sugar became a tactical concern." He moved into the room, and I was acutely aware of how much space he took up. Not just physically, though God knew he was imposing enough, but his presence seemed to fill every corner, demanding attention. I finally looked at him. He'd changed from his usual suit into dark jeans and a black t-shirt that did absolutely nothing to hide the muscles beneath. His hair was still damp from a shower, pushed back from his face in a way that made the sharp angles of his features even more pronounced. He was objectively attractive. I'd noticed that the first night, in the clinical way I noticed most things about people, cataloging details for potential use later. But there was nothing soft about Drake Carter's attractiveness. It was all hard edges and barely contained violence, like a blade wrapped in expensive fabric. "There's dinner downstairs," he said when I didn't respond. "Grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, brown rice. Nothing that will upset your delicate Hollywood stomach." The sarcasm in his voice made my jaw clench. "My delicate Hollywood stomach? I've read your dietary restrictions. No gluten, no dairy, no red meat, no sugar, no fun." He crossed his arms, leaning against the doorframe. "Let me guess, your nutritionist prescribed it?" "My trainer," I corrected, hating that I was defending myself. "I have to maintain a certain look for my career." "Your career." He said it like it was a dirty word. "Right. Can't have America's sweetheart looking anything less than perfect." The contempt in his voice was like a slap. I stood, the book tumbling from my lap. "You don't know anything about my life or what I have to do to maintain it. Don't I?" He pushed off the doorframe, moving into my space with that predatory grace that made my pulse spike. "I know you've been working nonstop since you were 3 years old. I know your father controls every aspect of your career, and from what I can see, most of your personal life too. I know you haven't taken a vacation that wasn't for a film shoot in 6 years. I know—" "Stop." I cut him off, my voice shaking. "Just stop." He did, but his eyes never left mine. And for the first time since I'd met him, I saw something other than cold assessment in them. Something that might have been understanding, or pity, or both. I hated it. I didn't need his pity. Didn't need him looking at me like I was some broken doll in a pretty dress. "The salmon will get cold," he said finally, his voice softer than before. "Come downstairs." It wasn't quite an order, but it wasn't a request either. I wanted to refuse. Wanted to assert some kind of control over my own life. But the truth was, I was hungry. Starving, actually. And sitting up here alone with my thoughts was driving me crazy. I followed him downstairs to the open concept kitchen and dining area. The table had been set for 2, and I realized with a start that Drake apparently intended to eat with me. "You're joining me?" I asked, unable to keep the surprise from my voice. "Someone needs to make sure you actually eat." He pulled out a chair, and I sat before I could think better of it. "Besides, we need to talk." "About what?" He served the food with an efficiency that suggested he was comfortable in a kitchen, which seemed at odds with everything else about him. When he sat across from me, his eyes were serious. "Your father received another letter today," he said without preamble. "Delivered to his office." My appetite vanished. "What did it say?" "The usual threats, but with more specific details about your schedule from last week. Places you went, people you saw, conversations you had in supposedly private locations." He paused. "Whoever this is, they're not just watching you, Aretha. They're close. Close enough to have access to information that should be confidential." The use of my first name surprised me. He'd been calling me Miss Tyler since we met, maintaining that professional distance. The shift felt significant somehow. "You think it's someone I know?" I said, the realization settling like ice in my stomach. "I think it's someone with access to your inner circle, your management team, your publicist, someone on your security detail before I took over. Maybe even someone from the set of your last film." I set down my fork, suddenly unable to even look at the food. "So, I can't trust anyone." "You can trust me," Drake said, and the certainty in his voice made me look up. "That's why your father hired me specifically. My reputation for discretion is impeccable, and I have no connections to Hollywood that could compromise my objectivity." "But you do have other connections," I said, remembering why his name had seemed familiar when we first met. "You're not just a security consultant, are you?" His expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between us. "What have you heard?" "Rumors, stories about the real power in Los Angeles, the kind that doesn't show up in tabloids or on red carpets." I met his gaze steadily. "You're a crime boss, aren't you?" I struggled with the word, feeling absurd saying it out loud. "A mafia boss." "The term is outdated," he said calmly, as if we were discussing the weather. "But yes, I run certain operations in this city that exist outside legal parameters. Your father knew that when he hired me. In fact, it's precisely why he hired me, because you're a criminal, because I have resources and connections the police don't, because I can operate outside the constraints of law enforcement, because I can protect you in ways they can't." He leaned forward. "Because when we find who's behind this, I can ensure they never threaten anyone again." The implication was clear. Drake Carter didn't believe in the justice system. He believed in permanent solutions. "You're going to kill them," I said, not quite a question. "I'm going to neutralize the threat," he corrected. "How permanent that neutralization needs to be depends on the circumstances." I should have been horrified. Should have demanded he leave, called my father, insisted on different protection. But all I felt was a strange, twisted relief. For once, someone was talking to me without euphemisms or careful PR speak. Drake Carter was dangerous, yes, but at least he was honest about it. "Why are you really doing this?" I asked. "My father must be paying you, but I can't imagine money is your primary motivation." His expression shifted, something dark passing over his features before he controlled it. "Let's just say I have personal reasons for wanting to find the person behind these threats." Personal reasons. The letters match patterns I've seen before. In another case, someone I cared about. He stood abruptly, clearing the dishes even though neither of us had eaten much. "That's all you need to know." But I could see the grief beneath his control, could recognize the shape of loss because I'd seen it in my own mirror. Drake Carter wasn't just protecting me for money, or even out of some sense of duty. This was personal for him too. Who did you lose? I asked quietly. He stopped, his back to me, hands gripping the edge of the sink. For a long moment he didn't answer, and I thought he wouldn't. Then, my sister, he said, his voice rough. 2 years ago. Similar threats, similar pattern. By the time we took it seriously, it was too late. The grief in his voice was raw, unguarded. It made him seem suddenly human in a way all his efficiency and control hadn't. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. He turned, and his eyes were cold again, the vulnerability locked away. Don't be sorry. Help me catch the bastard who killed her, because I'm fairly certain it's the same person who's after you. The weight of that statement settled over me. I wasn't just a target. I was bait. A tool to help Drake Carter catch his sister's killer. Does my father know? I asked. That this is connected to your sister? He knows I have incentive beyond money to keep you safe. The specifics are between you and me. Why tell me at all? Because you deserve to know why I'm so invested in this, and because I need you to trust me completely if we're going to work together. He moved back to the table, sitting across from me again. I'm not going to lie to you, Aretha. Your life is in danger. Real, serious danger. But I will do everything in my power to protect you. Not just because I'm being paid, but because I need to catch this person. For my sister. For my niece who almost lost her life too. For every future victim if we don't stop this now. The honesty was brutal, but refreshing. No one ever spoke to me like this. Like I was capable of handling the truth instead of needing to be protected from it. What do you need from me? I asked. Everything. Every detail about your life, no matter how small or embarrassing or private. Every person you've worked with, every relationship you've had, every place you frequent. I need to know you inside and out, Aretha. Your patterns, your habits, your weaknesses. Because whoever is after you already knows all of that. They're counting on us not knowing. The idea of being that exposed to him, of letting him see behind the carefully constructed persona, made my chest tight with anxiety, but I nodded. Okay. We start tomorrow. Full background interviews, pattern analysis, threat assessment. He stood again. For tonight, try to get some sleep. I'll be in the room next to yours if you need anything. He moved toward the door, and I found myself calling after him. Drake? He paused, looking back. Thank you, I said, for being honest with me, for treating me like I can handle the truth. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in that cold exterior. You're stronger than you think you are, Aretha. I can see that, even if no one else bothers to look. He left before I could respond, and I sat alone in that beautiful prison of a house, my heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. Drake Carter saw me. Not the actress, not the brand, not the carefully constructed image. He saw the person beneath, and he thought I was strong. That was more dangerous than any death threat could ever be. The interrogation, because that's what it really was, despite Drake's attempts to call it a background interview, started at 8 the next morning. I'd barely slept, my mind spinning with everything he'd told me, with the weight of being bait for a killer who'd already murdered once. Drake was already in the living room when I came downstairs, the coffee table covered with files, photographs, and what looked like a timeline stretching back years. He'd set up multiple laptops, their screens displaying data I couldn't quite make out from the doorway. Coffee? He asked without looking up, and I realized he'd somehow known I was there despite being completely focused on his work. Please, I said, moving into the room. I'd dressed carefully that morning, yoga pants and an oversized sweater, my hair pulled back in a messy bun, no makeup. The real me, or as close to real as I ever got. If he wanted to know me, he might as well see this version too. He glanced up as I approached, and something flickered in his eyes as they traveled over me. Not the cold assessment I'd grown used to, but something warmer, more human. It was gone in a second, replaced by his usual control, but I'd seen it. "You look different," he said, standing to pour coffee from a French press I hadn't noticed. "Younger." "I'm not wearing my mask," I replied, accepting the mug he offered. Our fingers brushed, and I felt that same jolt of awareness I'd experienced in the car. This is what I actually look like. I prefer it. He said it simply, as if the observation meant nothing, but I felt heat rise to my cheeks anyway. We settled on opposite ends of the couch, and Drake pulled up the first file on his tablet. "Let's start with your childhood. I know the public story. Child star, doting father who became your manager, steady rise to fame. But I want the real story." I stared into my coffee, watching the cream swirl in dark patterns. "The real story isn't very interesting. Try me." So I told him about how my mother left when I was 2, unable to handle my father's ambition, and the way he'd turned me into a commodity before I could walk. About auditions every weekend, acting classes every day after school, summers spent on film sets instead of playing with friends. About learning to cry on command by age 5 because that's what the script required. About never having a childhood because I was too busy portraying children for other people's entertainment. Drake listened without interrupting, his gray eyes fixed on my face with an intensity that should have made me uncomfortable but somehow didn't. He wasn't looking at Aretha Tyler, Hollywood's golden girl. He was looking at me, seeing things I'd never let anyone see before. "Your father," he said when I finished. "Tell me about your relationship with him now." I laughed, the sound bitter even to my own ears. "He's my manager. He controls my career, my finances, my schedule. Every decision about my life goes through him." "That's the professional relationship. What about the personal one?" The question made something twist in my chest. There is no personal relationship. There hasn't been since I was a child. Maybe never. Marcus Tyler doesn't have a daughter. He has a very profitable investment. Does he know about the eating disorder? The anxiety medication? I stiffened. He knows what he needs to know to manage my image. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. I set down my coffee with more force than necessary. My father cares about my career. Whether I'm healthy or happy or falling apart inside is irrelevant as long as I show up on set and deliver the performance. Drake was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. My father was like that too. Not with me, but with my sister. Sophia was beautiful, talented, everything he wanted in a daughter. He controlled every aspect of her life, who she saw, who she dated, what she wore. He said it was for her protection, to keep her safe in our world. What happened to her? I asked, even though I already knew the broad strokes. She met someone, fell in love, wanted to leave that life behind. His jaw tightened. My father forbade it, said she belonged to the family, that her life wasn't hers to throw away. So she ran, and 3 months later, she was dead. I'm sorry, I said again, meaning it even more this time. Don't be sorry. Be careful. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. Your father's control, his obsession with your career. It's made you vulnerable, Aretha. You're so focused on pleasing him, on maintaining this image, that you've made yourself predictable. Predictable people are easy targets. The word stung because they were true. So what do? You start making your own choices. You start trusting your instincts instead of your father's directives. You start living for yourself instead of for the cameras. He paused. And you start by telling me everything you've been too afraid to tell anyone else. Over the next several hours, I did exactly that. I told him about the director who'd cornered me in his trailer when I was 16, about the producer who'd made his interest very clear and very unwelcome when I was 19. I told him about the co-star I'd been engaged to, how he'd been sleeping with multiple women throughout our relationship, how I'd found out from a tabloid like everyone else. I told him about the loneliness, the isolation, the feeling of being on display every moment of every day. Drake took notes, asked questions, never judged. And somewhere in that long morning of confession, something shifted between us. The cold, professional distance began to thaw, replaced by something warmer and infinitely more dangerous. "There's one more thing," I said, as afternoon sun slanted through the windows. "Something I've never told anyone." He looked up from his tablet, giving me his full attention. "About 6 months ago, I was at a party. Industry thing, very exclusive. I went outside for air, and this man was there. I didn't know him, but he seemed to know me." He said. I swallowed hard. He said I was even more beautiful in person than on screen, that he'd been watching me for years, waiting for the right moment to introduce himself. Drake's entire body went rigid. "Did he touch you?" "He tried to kiss me. I pushed him away, told him I wasn't interested. He laughed and said it didn't matter what I wanted, that I belonged to everyone who'd ever watched one of my films." My hands were shaking, and I clasped them together to still them. My driver found me before anything else happened, but the way he looked at me, Drake, like I was something he owned, something he could take whenever he wanted. "Did you see his face? Would you recognize him?" "Maybe. It was dark, and I'd had a few drinks. But I think so." Drake stood abruptly, pulling out his phone. He made a call, speaking in rapid-fire instructions to whoever was on the other end. When he hung up, he turned back to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I'm having my people pull security footage from every industry party in the last 6 months. Every guest list, every hired staff member. We're going to find this man." "You think he's the one sending the threats?" "I think anyone who looks at you like your property is on my list of suspects." He moved to the window, staring out at the ocean. "You should have told someone about this months ago." "Who would I have told?" "My father, who would have worried about how it affected my image. The police, who would have wanted to go public with an investigation. My publicist, who would have spun it into some publicity opportunity." I stood, moving to stand beside him. "I've learned to handle these things myself, because no one else cares about protecting me. They only care about protecting the brand." Drake turned to face me, and we were suddenly very close. Close enough that I could see the silver flecks in his gray eyes, could smell the cedar and something darker underneath his cologne. Close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "I care about protecting you," he said, his voice low and rough. "Not the brand, not the image. You, Aretha. The woman who can't sleep without the TV on because silence makes her anxious. The woman who picks at her food because she's been trained to count every calorie since she was a child. The woman who's forgotten how to exist off camera because she's been performing since before she could walk. No one had ever seen me so clearly. No one had ever cared to look beneath the surface to find the broken pieces I'd been hiding for so long." "Why do you care?" I whispered. "I'm just a job to you." "You stopped being just a job the moment you told me about that bagel," he said, and there was the hint of a smile in his voice. "You're a person, Aretha. A complicated, frustrating, surprisingly strong person who deserves better than what life has given you." "I'm weak," I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. "I let my father control me. I let directors and producers and co-stars treat me like a thing instead of a person. I smile and perform and never fight back. That's not strength. Survival is strength." His hand came up, and for a moment I thought he might touch my face. But he stopped himself, lowering his hand. You've survived 24 years in an industry that eats people alive. You've maintained your sanity, mostly, while being objectified and commodified since childhood. You've built a successful career despite everyone around you treating you like you're just a pretty face. That takes more strength than you realize. Tears pricked my eyes, and I blinked them back furiously. I didn't cry. Couldn't cry. Crying was weakness, and weakness wasn't allowed. But a single tear escaped anyway, tracing down my cheek. Drake's control broke. His thumb caught the tear, wiping it away with a gentleness that seemed impossible from a man who looked like he could break someone in half without effort. "It's okay to cry," he said softly. "It's okay to break sometimes. I won't think less of you." Something inside me cracked open at those words, and suddenly I was crying. Really crying, not the pretty camera-ready tears I'd perfected over the years. Ugly, gasping sobs that shook my whole body and made my nose run and probably made me look absolutely horrible. Drake pulled me against his chest, his arms coming around me with surprising tenderness. He didn't tell me it was okay, or that everything would be fine. He just held me while I fell apart, one hand rubbing slow circles on my back, the other cradling my head against his shoulder. I didn't know how long we stood there, me crying into his shirt while he held me like I was something precious and breakable. Eventually the tears slowed, then stopped. But neither of us moved. "I'm sorry," I said finally, my voice muffled against his chest. "I got your shirt wet. I have others." His voice rumbled through his chest, and I could feel his heartbeat steady and strong under my cheek. "Feel better?" "Embarrassed, mostly." "Don't be." He pulled back just enough to look at me, and his eyes were warm in a way I'd never seen. "You've been holding that in for a long time. It needed to come out." I looked up at him, suddenly aware of how close we were, of the way his arms were still around me, of the heat between our bodies. His gaze dropped to my lips, and for a moment, just a moment, I thought he might kiss me. Instead, he stepped back, putting professional distance between us once more. But I could see the effort it took, could see the tension in his jaw and the way his hands clenched at his sides. "We should take a break," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "You've given me a lot to process." I nodded, not trusting my voice. He moved toward the kitchen, and I heard him making more coffee, the domestic sounds somehow jarring after the intimacy of the last few minutes. I touched my face where his thumb had wiped away my tear, still feeling the ghost of his touch. Drake Carter was supposed to be my protector, but I was beginning to realize he might be the most dangerous thing in my carefully controlled world. Not because he wanted to hurt me, but because he made me want things I'd forgotten I could have. Like honesty, like freedom, like someone who saw me as more than just a pretty face to photograph, like being touched with gentleness instead of possession. And that terrified me more than any stalker ever could. The days that followed fell into a strange rhythm. Drake worked his contacts, following leads that took him into parts of Los Angeles I'd never seen, the real city beneath the Hollywood gloss. He'd leave before dawn, returning at odd hours with updates that were equal parts progress and frustration. The man from the party remained unidentified. Security footage had been conveniently corrupted or missing from 3 different venues. Guest lists had people registered under fake names or as someone's +1. Whoever this person was, they knew how to move through my world without leaving traces. When Drake was gone, I was left with his team. Marcus, his second in command, was a former Marine with kind eyes and an easy smile that felt jarring given the circumstances. Elena, the tech specialist, was a tiny woman with purple hair who could hack into anything and often did without asking permission first. And Tony, the driver who replaced Miguel, barely spoke but watched everything with the alertness of someone who'd seen too much violence They were professionals, efficient, and surprisingly easy to be around once I stopped thinking of them as my captors and started seeing them as people just doing their job. "Boss is worried about you," Marcus said one afternoon while we sat on the deck overlooking the ocean. Drake had been gone for 3 days this time, tracking a lead in San Francisco, and I'd been restless, unable to focus on anything. "He doesn't seem like someone who worries," I replied, watching the waves crash against the rocks below. Marcus laughed. "That's because you haven't seen him when you're out of his sight. Man checks in every 4 hours like clockwork. Wants updates on what you ate, whether you slept, if you seemed upset. He's got it bad." "Got what bad?" "Nothing," Marcus said quickly, but he was smiling. Forget I said anything, but I couldn't forget. The idea that Drake Carter, cold and controlled and dangerous, might actually worry about me beyond his professional obligations sent warmth spreading through my chest. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered through the house, restless and anxious in a way that had nothing to do with the threats on my life. I ended up in Drake's room. Not intentionally, my feet just carried me there. His space was as controlled as everything else about him. Bed made with military precision, minimal personal items, everything in its place. But on his nightstand, I found something unexpected. A photograph. A woman laughed up at the camera, beautiful and carefree, holding a small girl with dark curls and Drake's gray eyes. His sister and niece, I realized. The family he'd lost. "That was the last good day we had," Drake's voice came from the doorway, and I spun around, clutching the photo frame to my chest. "I'm sorry," I said quickly. "I shouldn't have." "It's fine." He moved into the room, and I realized he looked exhausted. His shirt was wrinkled, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and there was a shadow of stubble on his jaw that made him look more human and somehow more dangerous. "I just got back. Marcus said you weren't sleeping." "How did the lead in San Francisco pan out?" "Dead end. Literally. The man we were tracking was found dead in his apartment 3 days ago. Overdose. Staged to look like an accident." He took the photo from me, staring at it with an expression that made my heart ache. "Whoever we're dealing with, they're cleaning up loose ends." "You think they knew you were getting close?" "I think they've been watching us just as carefully as we've been trying to find them." He set the photo down with careful precision. "Which means we need to change tactics." "What kind of tactics?" Drake's eyes met mine, and something in them made my pulse quicken. "We need to draw them out. Make them think they have an opportunity to get to you. You want to use me as bait." It wasn't a question. "I want to give them a chance to make a mistake, under controlled circumstances, with my entire team in position. You'd never be in real danger." "But they'd think I was vulnerable." "Yes. I should have been angry, should have refused, but all I felt was a strange sense of relief. Finally, I could do something instead of just hiding and waiting." "What do you need me to do?" Drake studied me for a long moment. "You'd agree? Just like that?" "You said your sister died because no one took the threat seriously enough. Because by the time your family acted, it was too late." I met his gaze steadily. "I won't let that happen to someone else. If I can help catch this person, help prevent them from hurting anyone else, then I'll do it." Something shifted in Drake's expression, that cold control cracking to reveal something warmer underneath. "You continue to surprise me, Aretha Tyler." "Is that a good thing?" "It's a dangerous thing." He moved closer, and suddenly the room felt too small, the air too warm. "You were supposed to be just another spoiled Hollywood actress who needed babysitting. You weren't supposed to be brave. You weren't supposed to be real." "Sorry to disappoint your prejudices," I said. trying for levity but failing because my voice came out breathless. You didn't disappoint them. You shattered them completely. His hand came up, and this time he didn't stop himself from touching me. His fingers traced along my jaw, tilting my face up to his. That's the problem. What problem? You're supposed to be a job, a means to an end. But somewhere between your confession about that bagel and watching you cry in my arms, you became something else entirely. My heart hammered against my ribs. What did I become? Mine, he said, the word rough and possessive. At least that's what I want you to become. What I shouldn't want, what I have no right to want, but want anyway. I should have pulled away, should have reminded him that this was professional, that I was vulnerable and traumatized and definitely not in a place to start something with anyone, let alone a crime boss who'd admitted to using me as bait. Instead, I leaned into his touch. And if I want that too? Then we're both incredibly stupid, he murmured, but he was leaning down, his breath warm against my lips. Because this is going to complicate everything. Maybe I'm tired of everything being simple and controlled and predictable, I whispered. Maybe I want complicated. He kissed me then, and it was nothing like the chaste, camera-ready kisses I'd performed in dozens of films. This was real and raw and desperate, his hands tangling in my hair, my fingers fisting in his shirt, both of us trying to get closer despite already being pressed together. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Drake rested his forehead against mine. This can't happen. Bit late for that, I pointed out, still dizzy from the kiss. I'm serious, Aretha. You're under my protection. Getting involved with you while you're vulnerable, while you're dependent on me for your safety, it crosses every ethical line. What if I don't care about ethics right now? You should. He stepped back, putting distance between us that felt like miles. Because when this is over, when we catch whoever's threatening you, you're going to wake up and realize you've been living in a pressure cooker. Stockholm Syndrome is real, and mixing that with... Don't, I interrupted, anger flaring hot in my chest. Don't you dare suggest this is Stockholm Syndrome. Don't diminish what I feel by making it about trauma or dependence or whatever psychological explanation makes you feel better about backing away. Then what is it? He challenged. You've known me less than 2 weeks, Aretha. I've known you longer than I've known most people in my life, I shot back. You've seen parts of me I've never shown anyone. You've been more honest with me in 10 days than some people have been in 10 years. So don't tell me this isn't real, just because it doesn't fit your timeline. We stared at each other, the tension thick enough to cut. Finally, Drake ran a hand through his hair, making it stand up in a way that would have been endearing if I wasn't so angry. You're right, he said quietly. I'm sorry. That was condescending. Yes, it was. But my point stands. This situation, me being responsible for your safety, it creates a power dynamic that isn't healthy for starting a relationship. So we wait, I said, even though everything in me protested. We wait until this is over, until I'm safe, until there's no question about power dynamics or vulnerability or ethics. And then we see if what we feel right now survives contact with reality, he finished. If you still want this when you're not living in a safe house, depending on me for everything. It was reasonable, rational, everything I should have suggested myself. I hated it, but I nodded. Okay, we wait. Drake's expression softened. For what it's worth, I hope like hell you still want this when we're on the other side. Because that kiss just ruined me for anyone else. Despite everything, I smiled. Good. That was the plan. He laughed, the sound surprising from someone normally so controlled. Get some sleep, Aretha. Tomorrow we start planning how to draw out a killer. Just another normal day in my life now, I said, trying for humor. He paused at the door, looking back. One more thing. Yeah? That man at the party, the one who said you belong to everyone, he was wrong. Drake's eyes were fierce. You don't belong to anyone except yourself. And anyone who tries to claim otherwise will have to go through me first. The promise in his voice sent shivers down my spine. Not fear, but something else entirely. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. After he left, I lay in his bed, because I was definitely sleeping there now, surrounded by his scent and the lingering warmth of his presence. My fingers touched my lips, still feeling the pressure of his kiss. Drake Carter was right. We were both incredibly stupid. But for the first time in years, I felt alive. Really, truly alive. Not performing, not pretending, just existing as myself with someone who saw me completely and still wanted me anyway. And if that meant facing down a killer to earn the right to explore whatever this was between us, then that's what I'd do. I'd spent my whole life being brave on camera. It was time to be brave in real life too. The plan was simple, which made me inherently suspicious. Nothing in my life had ever been simple. I was to attend a charity gala, my first public appearance since going into hiding. The event would be heavily publicized, my attendance confirmed through leaked information to key media outlets. Every detail of my schedule would be made available through channels Drake's team knew were compromised. My security detail would appear reduced, with only Marcus visible while the rest of Drake's team operated in shadows. The killer would think they had their opportunity, and we'd be waiting. "You don't have to do this," Drake said for the third time that morning as I stood in front of the mirror, trying on the dress his team had selected. It was stunning, a deep emerald silk that clung to my curves before flowing into a dramatic train. The kind of dress that would photograph beautifully and make me look like a target. "We've been over this," I replied, watching him in the reflection. He was behind me, close enough that I could feel his presence like a physical weight. "This is the best option we have. The best option is keeping you hidden until we identify the threat through other means, which could take months, years." I turned to face him. How many more people might die while we wait? How many other women might this person target? His jaw clenched, that muscle ticking in a way I'd learned meant he was controlling his temper. "You're not responsible for hypothetical future victims. Neither are you responsible for your sister's death," I said quietly. "But we both know you blame yourself anyway. Let me help you fix this, Drake. Let me help you save someone the way you couldn't save her." The words were harsh, but they needed to be said. We'd been dancing around his guilt for days, both of us pretending his motivation was purely professional, when we both knew it went far deeper than that. Drake moved closer, his hand settling on my waist with a possessiveness that made my breath catch. "You're using my dead sister to manipulate me into agreeing with you. Is it working?" "Unfortunately, yes." His forehead dropped to rest against mine, and I could feel the tension vibrating through his body. "You terrify me, Aretha Tyler. You make me want things I can't afford to want. You make me question decisions I know are right. You make me human," I suggested, my hands coming up to rest on his chest. I could feel his heart racing under my palms, matching the frantic pace of my own. "Weak," he corrected. "In my world, caring about someone makes you vulnerable. It gives your enemies a target. And I have a lot of enemies, Aretha. A lot of people who would love nothing more than to hurt me through someone I care about. Then we'll be careful. Careful isn't enough." He pulled back, putting distance between us again. It was becoming a pattern, these moments of connection followed by retreat, like he couldn't decide whether to pull me closer or push me away. "After tonight, after we catch this person, you need to walk away from me. Go back to your life, your career, your world. Forget you ever met me." The words hit like a physical blow. "Is that what you want?" "What I want is irrelevant. What's safe for you is all that matters." Don't I get a say in what's safe for me? Anger flared hot in my chest. I'm so tired of men making decisions about my life without consulting me. My father does it. My publicist does it. Every director I've ever worked with does it. I thought you were different. I am different, he said, his voice hard. I'm the kind of different that gets people killed. My sister fell in love with someone outside our world, and it got her murdered. My niece will spend the rest of her life in therapy because she watched her mother die. Every person who gets close to me ends up in danger or dead. That's not being protective, Aretha. That's being realistic. I stared at him, seeing past the cold exterior to the guilt and fear beneath. Drake Carter wasn't pushing me away because he didn't care. He was pushing me away because he cared too much. What if I'm willing to take that risk? I asked quietly. Then you're not as smart as I thought you were. He moved to the door, his hand on the handle. The gala starts at 8. Marcus will brief you on the security protocols. Wear your hair up. It'll make it easier to hide the wire. He left before I could respond, and I stood alone in that beautiful dress, feeling simultaneously powerful and helpless. Elena appeared in the doorway moments later, her purple hair pulled back into a sleek bun that made her look older, more serious. He's an idiot, she announced, moving into the room with a case of equipment. In case you were wondering. I wasn't, I lied. Sure you weren't. She began unpacking what looked like jewelry, but was actually sophisticated surveillance equipment. Drake's been alone for a long time, Aretha. Ever since Sophia died, he's been convinced that caring about anyone makes them a target. He's pushed away everyone who's tried to get close. Why are you telling me this? Because you're the first person I've seen him care about despite his best efforts not to. Elena held up a delicate necklace, its emerald pendant actually a camera and microphone. And because I think you're good for him. You make him remember what he's fighting for instead of just what he's fighting against. He doesn't want me in his life. He doesn't want you in danger. There's a difference. She fastened the necklace around my throat, her fingers gentle but efficient. After tonight, after this is over and you're safe, don't let him push you away. Make him see that you're stronger than he gives you credit for. That you can handle his world if you choose to. What if I can't? The question escaped before I could stop it, revealing the fear I'd been trying to hide. What if he's right, and I'm just playing at being strong because the situation demands it? What if when this is over, I go right back to being the controlled, compliant person I've always been? Elena met my eyes in the mirror. Then you will have wasted a perfectly good opportunity to become someone new. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think you've been strong all along, Aretha. You just needed someone to see it before you could see it yourself. The gala was being held at the Grand Regency Hotel, one of Los Angeles's most prestigious venues. As our car pulled up to the entrance, I could see the red carpet stretching out like a blood-stained ribbon. Photographers lined up like executioners waiting for their target. Last chance to back out, Drake said from beside me. He'd barely spoken during the drive, his attention fixed on the tablet showing feeds from dozens of cameras his team had positioned throughout the venue. I'm not backing out. I know. He finally looked at me, and something in his expression made my heart clench. You look beautiful, by the way. I should have said that earlier. You were too busy trying to talk me out of this. Occupational hazard. His hand found mine, squeezing briefly before letting go. Remember the protocols. Marcus will be with you the entire time. Don't go anywhere alone, don't accept drinks from anyone, don't leave the main ballroom. And if anything feels wrong, signal Marcus, who will signal you, and you'll extract me immediately. I know, Drake. We've been over this 100 times. Once more won't hurt. The door opened, and the world exploded into noise and light. I stepped out onto the red carpet, and immediately the cameras started flashing, voices calling my name, questions being shouted over each other. Aretha, over here! You look stunning. Where have you been? Is it true you've been receiving death threats? That last question made me stumble, but Marcus was there instantly, his hand steady on my elbow, guiding me forward. I smiled, waved, posed for the cameras with practiced ease. The performance came naturally after so many years, my body moving through the motions while my mind stayed alert, scanning faces in the crowd for anyone who seemed too interested, too focused. Inside the ballroom, the atmosphere was exactly what I expected. Wealth and pretension wrapped in designer clothing and false smiles. People I'd known for years approached with air kisses and empty compliments, and I played my part perfectly. The gracious star, grateful for the support, deflecting questions about my absence with vague references to personal time and focusing on my craft. Through it all, I was hyper-aware of the necklace around my throat, of Drake listening to every word I said, watching through the hidden camera. It should have felt invasive, but instead it felt comforting. He was there, even when I couldn't see him. "Aretha Tyler," a voice said behind me, sending ice down my spine. "It's been too long." I turned slowly, every instinct screaming danger even as my face arranged itself into a polite smile. The man standing before me was in his late 40s, handsome in a practiced way, wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than most people's cars. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice steady despite the alarm bells ringing in my head. "Have we met?" "Briefly, at a party 6 months ago." His smile widened, revealing perfect white teeth. "Though you seemed quite distressed that evening. I hope you're feeling better now." The party. The man who'd tried to kiss me, who'd said I belonged to everyone who watched my films. This was him. "Marcus," I said quietly, not taking my eyes off the man. My security was beside me in seconds, his hand settling on my arm in what looked like a casual gesture, but was actually positioning himself between me and the threat. "Is there a problem?" Marcus asked, his voice friendly but his eyes hard. "No problem at all," the man said, but he was watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "I was just reintroducing myself to Miss Tyler. We're old friends." "I don't think we are," I said, finding my voice. "I don't even know your name." "That hurts, Aretha, after all the time I've spent getting to know you." He leaned closer, and I could smell his cologne, expensive and cloying. "All those letters I sent, all those photographs I took, and you don't even remember my name." The confession was delivered so casually, like he was discussing the weather. Around us, the party continued, oblivious to the monster standing in the middle of the ballroom. "Step back," Marcus ordered, his hand moving toward his jacket where I knew his weapon was concealed. But the man was faster. His hand shot out, grabbing my wrist with bruising force, and I felt something sharp press against my side. A knife, I realized with crystal clarity. He had a knife hidden in his sleeve. "We're going to walk out of here together," he said, his voice still friendly, his smile still in place. To anyone watching, we might have been having a pleasant conversation. "You're going to smile and wave to your adoring fans, and if you do anything to alert security, I will gut you right here on this ballroom floor. Do you understand?" I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. "Good girl." He started moving toward the exit, pulling me with him, and Marcus moved to follow. But the man shook his head. "Tell your bodyguard to stay back, Aretha, or I start cutting." "Don't follow," I managed to say to Marcus, my voice barely audible. But I knew Drake was listening, knew he could see everything through my necklace camera, knew he was already moving. The man led me through the crowd, and I smiled like he'd instructed, my face hurting from the effort. People called out to me, and I waved with my free hand, playing the part one more time. The perfect actress, giving the performance of her life while a killer held a knife to her ribs. We were almost to the exit when everything happened at once. The lights went out, plunging the ballroom into darkness. Women screamed, men shouted, and I felt the knife at my side waver for just a second. It was all the opening I needed. I'd spent years training for action roles, learning fight choreography, building strength and flexibility. I'd always thought those skills were just for camera. But now, in the darkness, I used everything I'd learned. I stomped down hard on my captor's instep, twisted away from the knife, and drove my elbow back into his solar plexus with all my strength. He grunted, his grip loosening, and then Drake was there. I couldn't see him, but I could hear the sounds of impact, flesh hitting flesh, the knife clattering to the floor. The emergency lights flickered on, bathing everything in red, and I saw Drake standing over the man who'd been terrorizing me for months. "Don't kill him," I said, and Drake looked up at me, something feral in his eyes. "Give me one good reason why not. Because I need him to face justice, real justice, not just your revenge." I moved closer, looking down at the man who'd made me a prisoner in my own life. And because I need him to tell me why. Why me? Why did you choose me? The man laughed, blood bubbling from his split lip. "Because you're perfect, the perfect victim, the perfect prey. Everyone loves you, Aretha Tyler, but no one really sees you. You're just an image, a fantasy. I wanted to make you real by making you afraid." Drake's fist connected with the man's jaw, and he went limp. "He's not dead," Drake said when I gasped. "Just unconscious. But if you hadn't been here, I wouldn't have stopped." Police were flooding into the ballroom now, summoned by Drake's team. Marcus appeared at my side, and Elena was there too, looking furious and relieved at the same time. "You did it," she said, pulling me into a hug. "You caught him." But I was looking at Drake, at the blood on his knuckles and the fury still burning in his eyes. He met my gaze across the chaos, and I saw everything he wasn't saying. The fear he'd felt, the rage at almost losing me, the acknowledgement that I'd held my own, that I'd been exactly as strong as he'd told me I was. "It's over," I said, the words feeling surreal. "Yes," he agreed, but he didn't sound relieved. He sounded sad, because we both knew what came next. The investigation, the police reports, the media circus, my return to normal life, and Drake stepping back, pushing me away for my own good. The web that had trapped us both was breaking apart, but I wasn't sure either of us was ready to be free. The man's name was Richard Holbrook, and he was exactly the kind of monster who hid in plain sight. A respected entertainment lawyer with clients across Hollywood, he'd used his access and connections to stalk multiple women over the years. I was just his latest obsession, the one he'd decided was worth killing for. Drake's sister Sophia had been another. We learned that 2 days after the arrest, sitting in a police conference room while detectives laid out the evidence. Photographs of Sophia, letters similar to the ones I'd received, a timeline that showed Holbrook had been obsessed with her for months, before he finally acted on his fantasies. Drake sat beside me, his face carved from stone, as they showed us crime scene photos I knew would haunt me forever. His sister had fought. She'd survived the initial attack, long enough to make sure her daughter was safe, long enough to identify her attacker before succumbing to her injuries. But the police hadn't believed her. Richard Holbrook was too well connected, too respected. They'd written off her claims as the delusions of a dying woman, and he'd walked free, until now. "He'll spend the rest of his life in prison," the detective said, closing the file. "Between the evidence we've gathered and Miss Tyler's testimony, along with the confession he gave at the scene, he won't see daylight again." Drake nodded once, his hand finding mine under the table. He'd been touching me more since that night. Casual gestures that felt like lifelines, like he was reassuring himself I was still there, still safe, still alive. But he still hadn't asked me to stay. The media circus that followed was exactly as exhausting as I'd feared. Every outlet wanted an interview. Every reporter wanted the inside story of how America's sweetheart had been stalked by a monster. My father appeared, suddenly concerned about my well-being, now that my survival made for good publicity. I went through the motions, the interviews, the photo shoots, the carefully crafted statements prepared by my publicist. But my heart wasn't in it anymore. Every smile felt more fake than the last, every performance more hollow. Drake's team had moved me back to my own house, now equipped with security that made Fort Knox look amateur. But Drake himself had disappeared. Marcus said he was handling business. Elena claimed he was dealing with fallout from the investigation. But I knew the truth. He was avoiding me, giving me space to recover and readjust to normal life. Preparing to remove himself from my world, now that the threat was gone. I gave him 3 days before I stopped being patient. I found him at a warehouse in East Los Angeles, the kind of place that didn't appear on any map and operated in the shadows of the city. His Escalade was parked outside, and 2 of his men tried to stop me from entering before Marcus waved them off. "He's going to be pissed you're here," Marcus warned. "Good. I'm pissed he's been avoiding me." Inside, the warehouse was exactly what I expected. Concrete and shadows, with shipping containers stacked like building blocks. Drake stood in the center with several men I didn't recognize, all of them looking dangerous in a way that should have frightened me, but didn't. "Aretha," Drake said when he saw me, and I watched every emotion flicker across his face before he controlled them. Surprise, pleasure, fear. "You shouldn't be here. You've been avoiding me." "I've been busy." "Bullshit." I moved toward him, ignoring the interested looks from his associates. "You've been hiding, running, pushing me away because now that the threat is gone, you don't have an excuse to keep me close anymore." His jaw clenched. "Gentlemen, give us a moment." The warehouse cleared quickly, leaving us alone in that vast space. Drake turned to face me fully, and I could see the exhaustion in every line of his body. "You're right," he said simply. "I have been avoiding you." "Why?" "Because being near you makes me want things I can't have. Because every time I see you, I have to remind myself that you're not mine, that you never were mine, that this was always temporary." He moved closer, and I could see the barely controlled emotion in his eyes. "Because watching you walk back into that world, smile for those cameras, become that perfect image again. It kills me, Aretha. It kills me knowing you're going to disappear back into the life I pulled you out of, and I won't be able to stop it. What if I don't want to go back?" The words escaped before I could second-guess them. What if I want something different? Something real? You don't know what you're saying. You're traumatized, grateful for being saved, caught up in the intensity of the last few weeks. That's not a foundation for— "Don't," I interrupted, anger flaring hot. "Don't you dare tell me I don't know my own mind. I've been making decisions based on what other people want since I was 3 years old. My father, my publicist, directors, producers, everyone telling me what to think, how to feel, who to be. You were the first person who told me I was strong enough to decide for myself. So don't take that away now by suggesting I don't actually know what I want. And what do you want?" "You," I said simply. "This. A life that's mine instead of one performed for cameras. The freedom to choose who I give myself to instead of having my body and time controlled by contracts and commitments. I want to wake up without makeup and drink coffee without counting calories. I want to cry when I'm sad and laugh when I'm happy without worrying about how it photographs. I want to be with someone who sees me, really sees me, not just the image I've been forced to project." Drake stared at me, and I watched the internal battle play across his face. "You think you want that now, but—" "I quit," I interrupted. "What?" I quit acting. I called my father this morning and told him I was done. Finished my current contracts, fulfilled my obligations, but after that, I'm out. The words felt both terrifying and liberating. He threatened to sue me, cut me off financially, destroy my reputation. I told him to do his worst. Drake's expression was unreadable. Aretha, you can't throw away your entire career because... I'm not throwing it away. I'm choosing something else. Or rather, I'm choosing the possibility of something else. I moved closer, close enough to feel his heat, to smell cedar and danger. You said you needed to know if what we feel survives contact with reality. Well, this is me, stripped of the costumes and the roles and the image. This is reality. A woman who's terrified and uncertain, and has no idea what she's going to do with her life, but who knows she doesn't want to do it without you. I'm a criminal, Aretha, a mob boss. I hurt people. I operate outside the law. That's not going to change. I know, and I'm not asking you to change. I'm asking you to let me choose you anyway, knowing exactly who and what you are. I reached up, my hand cupping his face. You saw me when no one else did. You gave me the strength to break free from a cage I didn't even realize I was in. Don't I get to return the favor? Don't I get to see you beyond the cold, dangerous exterior you show the world? His control finally broke. His hands came up to frame my face, his touch desperate and gentle at once. You're going to regret this. Someday, you're going to wake up and realize what you gave up for me, and you're going to resent me for it. Maybe, I admitted. Or maybe I'll wake up and realize I finally made a choice for myself instead of for everyone else. Maybe I'll be grateful for the rest of my life that I was brave enough to choose what I actually wanted instead of what I was supposed to want. And you want me? Even knowing my world is violent and dangerous and nothing like what you're used to? Especially knowing that, because your world is honest in a way mine never was. The violence is real. The danger is real. The emotions are real. I'll take real and terrifying over fake and safe any day. Drake kissed me then, and it was nothing like the first kiss we'd shared. That one had been hesitant, questioning. This was absolute. A claiming and a surrender rolled into one desperate collision. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. My family is going to hate this. They'll think you're a liability, that you're too much of a target because of who you were. Were you in love with your sister? I asked suddenly. The question seemed to catch him off guard. Of course, she was family. And loving her got her killed. But you'd do it again, wouldn't you? You'd choose to love her even knowing the cost because she was worth it. Yes. Then extend me the same courtesy. Let me choose this. Knowing the risks, knowing the costs, let me decide I'm willing to pay them, because you're worth it. Something shifted in his expression, the last of his resistance crumbling. Okay. I'll stop trying to protect you from your own choices. I'll stop pushing you away for your own good. I'll let you into my world, my life, my everything. His thumb traced my lower lip. But understand this, Aretha Tyler. If you're mine completely. I don't do halfway, and I don't share. My world doesn't have room for the kind of public life you're used to. You won't be able to walk red carpets or give interviews or live in the spotlight. Good. I'm done with the spotlight. Your father will never forgive you for this. Your industry friends will probably abandon you once you're no longer useful to their careers. You'll be giving up fame, money, status, everything you've built. I'll be trading hollow success for genuine connection. Seems like a good deal to me. Drake studied me for a long moment, and I could see him trying to find the catch, trying to convince himself this was real. Finally, he smiled. Not his controlled, professional smile, but something genuine and warm and absolutely devastating. Then welcome to my world, Aretha. It's dangerous and complicated, and nothing like what you're used to. But it's real, and it's yours if you want it. I want it, I said. I want all of it. The danger, the complications, the reality. And I want you. You have me, he promised, for better or worse. For as long as you'll have me. I kissed him again, and this time it was a promise. Not the temporary connection of protector and protected, but something deeper. Something that would last. Outside the warehouse, Los Angeles continued its relentless pace. The cameras kept flashing. The tabloids kept printing lies. The industry kept churning through fresh faces to replace the ones who dared to break free. But I was done performing for them. Done being their fantasy, their image, their carefully controlled product. I was Aretha Tyler, and for the first time in my life, that meant exactly what I decided it meant. Nothing more, nothing less. And what I decided was that I belonged here. In Drake Carter's arms, in his dangerous world, in his real, messy, complicated life. I'd spent 24 years as America's sweetheart. It was time to find out who I actually was, beneath all that carefully constructed perfection. Something told me Drake was going to enjoy watching me figure it out,